Hello everybody and welcome back to Rev Left Radio. I have a wonderful episode for you today. I have on the show filmmaker Steven De Castro to talk about a film he shot a few years ago but is now being released on Means TV called Revolution Selfie, The Red Battalion. And this is a really interesting documentary about the New People's Army in the Philippines, the Maoist guerrilla communist movement in the jungles of the Philippines. This is a wonderful documentary. Highly recommend people go to Means TV and check it out. I learned a lot. The on-the-ground interviews are wonderful. The way the entire documentary is set up is entertaining and unique. It's not the same old when it comes to documentary formats, which can be kind of boring. This is different. It's entertaining, it's funny, it's moving, it's inspiring, and it's really embedding himself with a battalion of the MPA in the jungles of the Philippines, and just talking and showing the people, why they joined up, the community that they've developed out in the mountains, in the jungles, the poverty inside the major city centers of the Philippines, in this case Manila. Just a fascinating exploration of a revolutionary communist movement that is I think it's past their 50-year anniversary of the party itself, the movement itself, waging people's war against right-wing, colonialist, fascist, imperialist forces backed by the U.S. as always. And it's a really unique and profoundly inspiring film, and this conversation about it is absolutely wonderful. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Steven De Castro on his newest film, Revolution Selfie, The Red Battalion, put out by Means TV. Enjoy.
My name's Steven De Castro, and I'm a filmmaker, or documentary filmmaker. I guess I could call myself a revolutionary filmmaker. And I'm based in New York, Queens, New York. I am interested in looking at liberation movements throughout the world, including especially like peasant liberation movements. And so it's about looking at the poorest of the poor and how they respond to the conditions of exploitation and inequality, and how they themselves take destiny into their own hands in the revolutionary spirit of humanity. And so that's what I explore with my work right now.
Beautiful. Yeah, and we're going to be talking today about the New People's Army in the Philippines. This is the documentary that you released is focused, this one that we're going to talk about today is focused on the MPA in the Philippines. Longtime listeners of the show know that we've done episodes on the New People's Army and the Filipino communist movement. And over on our sister podcast, Guerrilla History, we actually got the wonderful opportunity, as you did in your film, to talk to Comrade Joma before he passed away. So that was a wonderful opportunity for us. And I'll link to that interview in the show notes for anybody who wants to dive deeper onto this topic. But first and foremost, Steven, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really loved this film. I thought it was very unique and interesting, the way that you conducted it. Brave in the sense of you embedding yourself within an organization that the United States considers a terrorist organization, which I'm sure we'll get to. But before we get into all that, can you just kind of tell us about this documentary, how you got the idea, and what your goal was by making it?
This documentary is called Revolution Selfie, The Red Battalion. And so the idea of this documentary is that it is a movie that is kind of like a movie, but it really doesn't know what it is. And sometimes it is like a game, like a first-person video game. And through the format of this game, the audience plays me as a filmmaker, and I bring the audience face to face with an armed revolution in the southern Philippines, known as the New People's Army, which is a wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines. And what I'm trying to focus on is actually not party and politics and policy and stuff like that, but just bring people on the ground with the experience of working with peasants as they figure it out in terms of how they're going to solve the problems of this world, global inequality and exploitation and imperialism, and how this actually works out from the point of view of the peasants, so that's how the and that's Revolution Selfie, the Red Battalion. And how I got this idea, I think, was that I realized that well, at first I was interested in a documentary about the NPA, and I was probably thinking in more of a traditional sense of oh yeah, we're just going to do some interviews. We're going to shoot some B-roll, and then, the interviews over the B-roll and yada, yada. It's the same documentary and news type of style that you've seen for like 60 years. It's a very effective way of doing a story. But what I believe is that if you do the movie in a traditional way, people's reaction to it and their attitudes are going to be traditional. They're going to be like the establishment attitude towards something like armed guerrillas in the jungle. And so I walked around New York City for a couple of years, and people would ask me, oh, what are you working on? And I said, yeah, I'm working on a movie about armed guerrillas in the jungle. And the response I got was usually kind of like boredom, because people feel like this has been depicted in many movies and news stories and so forth. And essentially, I'm making a movie out of the extras in an Arnold Schwarzenegger type of movie or whatever. And so people are not interested in that because they feel like they know like what the establishment wants them to believe in terms of the attitudes towards, like, oh, these guerrillas, they're either terrorists or they've got no chance to win, or they're just exploiting the people or something like that. So I decided that, that matrix of belief is so strong. The matrix of prejudice against revolutionary movements is so strong on the TV screen that you need another approach. You need a way to shake people up. So I just wanted people to focus on the game space. Like when you're playing a game, you are immersed in the experience, in the moment. And I just wanted to construct Revolution Selfie as a series of moments, kind of like goal-oriented, like a game a little bit, and move people through the spaces of first Manilla in the first half, experiencing like what global poverty, extreme poverty looks like in this world, and then moving them into the liberated zone, the operating area of the New People's Army, and how the same peasants who you see in Manila are doing something different in the jungle. They're organizing themselves as under a shadow government in a revolution to try to fight this system and change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And just out of curiosity, how did you connect up? Because you told me before we started recording that this was actually filmed a few years ago. How did you connect up with Means TV to release it on their platform?
Oh man, this is something else. So there's an amazing independent filmmaker. His name is Chris Bell, and he just I was just coming out of Iraq because I was embedded with the Kurdish Revolution, specifically the Yazidi people in Sinjar mountain range, northern Iraq. And so I thought I was going to be there for months, and then I had to cut it short. I came back after 3 months. The moment I got back, I got contacted from Chris Bell saying that he wanted to curate Revolution Selfie for Spectacle Theater in Brooklyn. And then Chris Bell said, oh, yeah, I want to refer you to Means TV and the founder, Nick Hayes. So it's Nick Hayes and Naomi are the founders of Means TV. And so this was great. And so I actually invited Chris to, I was going up to Vermont to a friend's house, and I said, hey, Nick, let's meet. Let's talk about this movie deal, and we'll meet in Vermont. So he came. We spent the weekend in Vermont, and we talked about all types of stuff, like revolution and film and everything. So I got 2 film distribution with Means TV. And so right now on Means TV, you can see Revolution Selfie, the Red Battalion, and learn about the Red Battalion, which in their language is Pulang Pagani Battalion. So you can learn about the people of the Pulang Pagani Battalion. But eventually, I don't know when, they're going to release my other film, which is the first film I ever made, which is about Fred Ho. He's an Asian-American radical activist and saxophone player and avant-garde a composer dying of cancer, and my movie's called Fred Ho's Last Year. So actually, it was great to, involve myself with Means TV, because it's not just a channel. Means TV is a community. So I get to, see Nick and Naomi on Zoom a lot, and we talk about how we can further develop the co-op, which is Means TV.
Yeah. Awesome. Huge shout out to Nick and Naomi and all the homies in the Means TV co-op doing great work. We've been obviously connected with them for many years at this point and help promote their shows. And there's a sort of synergy between what they're doing and what we're doing. And I always love everything they do and everything they put out. So that's really, really cool. Of course, if you want to see this film, go subscribe to Means TV. You'll be supporting a co-op with revolutionary comrades doing good cultural work, and you'll be able to see this wonderful documentary. But as you were mentioning before, this documentary is unique and different for several reasons, including, you embedding yourself with them, the DIY approach. As far as I can tell, it seems like it's just you out there recording everything by yourself, and of course the video game elements that we discussed a little bit earlier. Can you just talk a little bit more about those artistic decisions and maybe just a little bit more about why you chose to approach things in this unique way?
I think I was watching my nephew one time, of course, teenagers are always hard to get through to or whatever, especially if you're trying to tell them something lefty or revolutionary or whatever. So, but then I was watching him at the computer. And at first I thought he was playing a game, and then I realized, oh no, he's not playing a game. He's watching somebody else playing Call of Duty. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the interesting part, although that's a little crazy though. But what it was the guy who's playing Call of Duty is actually giving a history lecture about something, and so my nephew is watching this guy playing his Call of Duty, and he's absorbing the history at the same time. And I thought, wow, his generation processes information differently. And so I found that interesting. I also find it interesting that when you look at video games and YouTube and social media in general and TikTok and all that, the visual language is really interesting and is almost never goes into the film language. In other words, films and even television, they don't incorporate the visual language of, say, like a YouTuber, unless they're doing like some type of faux YouTube or faux social media section for their TV show or whatever, or their movie. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? You have an entire visual language, especially the first person perspective, that you almost never see in TV and movies today, even though people are consuming this content more than they're consuming NBC or Netflix or whatever.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. And it's a really cool little history of how you got that idea and then you applied it to this film. Am I correct in saying that the DIY part is literally you doing all the filming by yourself, or did you have some help?
Yes. This is interesting because, it's impossible to make a film of almost any scale by yourself. And so, but this is as close to by myself as possible, actually. And part of it is it's very difficult, very dangerous to embed yourself in a war. Then it became something where I could use the fact that this is kind of like a fake game, or the fact that there's fantasy elements in this story to fill in the gaps of the story and to bring out like certain truths that are like the artistic truths of the struggle that I'm trying to depict, that is more important than the truths of just recording what's in front of the camera in a sober or objective way. And so that became and the idea that you could bring in fantasy elements into a documentary under the right approach was important to me, and also helps out the fact that it is very difficult to film stuff in a war. Some people don't want to be identified, and also just the there's a story of a movie that's not the story. So movie making is storytelling, but a movie, always there's a story of the story of how the story is told. And so for Revolution Selfie is a very specific grassroots kind of story behind the story. And the grassroots story is what would happen if you tried to make a movie if you were somebody who never saw a movie before. I mean, what would that look like? Or what would happen if you decided you were going to make a movie with just the stuff that happens to be in your backpack? And so that is a part of the Revolution story. The story behind the story is also supposed to be like low budget, grassroots. I like to say that, in real life, I'm a cinematographer. So the job of a cinematographer is to make your movie look like $1 million. But under Revolution Selfie, I'm trying to make the movie look like $20.
Yeah.
And so it turns out, yeah, I mean, the wedding of the story with the camera, the kind of camera you use, the way you move the camera with the story is the most important part. I won a cinematography award in Italy for this movie.
Nice.
And the camera I used costs now you can get it on eBay for like $40 or something like that. And so I learned a lot about cameras and cinematography and the art of cinematography by the fact that I was never using my cinema camera. I was always using like a small GoPro camera.
Yeah, so interesting. Wonderful. And I know a lot of this might sound a little hard to picture in your mind, but that's why I really encourage people to go check out the documentary. It really is done in a really fascinating, cool way. And I've watched a million documentaries in my life, never quite seen one like this. So I highly encourage people to check it out. But let's get into the content of the film itself. For those that don't know, and of course Rev Left listeners will at least be somewhat aware of the MPA, right? The New People's Army in the Philippines, Maoist guerrillas fighting the Filipino capitalist ruling class, etc. But can you just kind of remind us who the MPA is, how you were able to make contact and embed yourself among them, and importantly, the dangers that you faced traveling to the Philippines to cover them up close?
Yes. Well, the NPA, or the New People's Army, is a Maoist guerrilla group, and it is something that I've heard about probably my entire life. As a Filipino, I am an American-born Filipino, but my parents are from Mindanao and Cebu, and in the Philippines, and so my parents are always concerned about social justice, social issues. And my father always talking about it. And as an American immigrant, of course, you're worried about getting a job, trying to feed your family. And so for him, I think that this idea of going back to the Philippines and helping out the people was always just a pipe dream that, sounds good, but he never really has time for it or whatever. And but he always was talking about it because, in a sense, my parents were driven out because of Marcos. That they were being under the tutelage of the U.S. State Department, similar to Marcos as college kids. But then they were brought by a State Department to Washington D.C. and at that point, Marcos got elected, and they said, and these people all know each other and stuff, and they said, fuck that, we don't want to work for Marcos, and so they then decided to stay in the United States. And so I was always hearing about the NPA because of my father saying, NPA is not gonna, they're idealistic leftists, they're not gonna they're not going to accomplish what they want. But he appreciates their idealism in his in his viewpoint. And so after being a filmmaker for a while, I decided, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try to do something with the NPA. Actually, the first thing that happened is I met Joma. And this is interesting because this is the first time that I was face to face with somebody who is in the history books. I mean, and a history that I know extremely well, know, and that it's like, an American being face to face with, George Washington or something like that, right. And here he is. Wow, man. I get to meet and hang out with Jose Maria Sison, the founder of the Communist Party of the Philippines. So we were hanging out in Utrecht, the Netherlands. And then I met all other revolutionaries there too. And then after I interviewed him and so forth, I worked out a plan where, of going to the Philippines and doing the embed with the New People's Army. But see, when you're dealing with a revolutionary movement, it's not like dealing with a corporation where they say, okay, you can come and film because the CEO says you can come and film, and you get a letter from the CEO and that opens all the doors. It doesn't work like that. It's like Joma could say, you could go over there and film. Then I go over there, and then I meet some people who go, what are you doing here? We don't know anything about it. Then I have to start the process all over again. And then they go, okay, fine. We'll assign you to an NPA unit. And then I go down to Mindanao to hook up with that NPA unit. And then it's the same thing again. The commanders are sitting in the jungle, and they're like, okay, what the hell are you doing here? And we don't know anything about it. And I have to start the process all over again. And so that's what happens, But in terms of the danger, the biggest issue, I think, is the danger of the people that are helping you out. They could be taking risks to get you into the area, and people are really risking their lives to help me make a film. And I am describing the film to them. And so the film is kind of like, well, you've seen the film. The film is sometimes funny, sometimes deprecating, often is self-deprecating film. And so it's kind of like a jokey film a little bit. So people are risking their lives to help me do this, but this film is it's not like a serious film. It's supposed to be an entertaining film, And so this is another thing that I learned as a filmmaker, which is that, for you and me, when we make media, we're very serious about it because we already have like a leftist commitment to the masses. So of course, we want to be as serious as possible in making our film or making our artwork. But for a filmmaker, that does not mean that your film has to be serious. And thank goodness, because I, in fact, don't watch serious films. Like I get bored just like everybody else. And so I had to realize that, a filmmaker, this is pop culture here. A filmmaker is an entertainer, like a circus performer. And I wanted to embrace that. And I have a serious purpose, but it doesn't mean that I can't make a film that people are going to want to watch, or people can't have a laugh once in a while and so forth. So that was important for me. The idea that filmmaking is still entertainment, and that is important. Was important for me to realize.
Yeah, and there's definitely some funny moments, but it's also next to genuinely moving and inspiring moments. Some of the interviews you do, for example, these people they're having fun, they're obviously with their friends, they're sort of like making jokes amongst each other, but also they'll have these moments of real seriousness where they're telling you why they're dedicating their life and risking their life to fight for the masses, to fight for a better world. And so that comedy juxtaposed next to the inspirational and the moving aspects, juxtaposed to the unique, whole style of the film itself, makes for a really wonderful and, as you said, entertaining and enjoyable experience while you're also learning a lot. And I really appreciated that about this film. And one of the comedy aspects, one of the parts that I found particularly funny is when you're discussing the illegality of this entire process. The United States, of course, has dubbed the MPA on their terrorist organization list, so you could get in real trouble for being a part of it. And you have this little part of the film where you have to kind of say, explicitly, don't join the MPA, and then you jump off this tall building. Can you talk a little bit about the dangers as far as this organization being labeled a terrorist organization and you being an American, and some of the possible obstacles you had to look out for when doing that?
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why it's so hard to get information about revolution, because there's, of course, the cultural matrix of prejudice that you'd have to go through if you're trying to get your information through CNN or whatever. But there's also the fact that it's a kind of a gray area whether a filmmaker or a media person can actually do a movie like I just did. Because like when you embed yourself with a revolutionary movement which is fighting against essentially the United States, the United States is trying to reinforce its rule in the Philippines because they want the Philippines to be like a platform for their next war, their next war of choice against China, which is really, I think, what we could call not a war of choice, but a war of multiple choice. Because right now we're in Ukraine doing a war, which in my view is completely avoidable war. And then they're already queuing up they want to be in a war with China. So they're actually making the Philippines a military platform for possibly an attack on China. So this film is embedding with something the NPA is called Foreign Terrorist Organization, FTO. So for an FTO, there are hundreds of organizations across the world that are on the FTO list. And so you could go to prison if you work with an FTO. And so if you go to embed with the FTO and then you say, I hate these people, they're evil, then everything's fine. But if you go in there and you say, oh no, I think these people are really cool or whatever, then like there's a possibility that you can go to prison for 17 years. And so that is something that we deal with in the movie, in a little bit of an interlude, which I call the leap of faith in neoliberal capitalism, which is I'm trying to say, don't join the NPA as a signal to whoever wants to put me in jail that okay, I don't want to go to jail for doing this movie, and then I do this leap off this building. That leap is in the Guinness Book of World Records because it is the highest bungee jump in the world. It is 688 feet or something like that. But that sounds pretty impressive, but actually it's just an amusement that you can do in the city of Macau. Macau is a former Portuguese colony next to Hong Kong, and it's really known for casinos and shit like that. But it also has this opportunity. You pay some money, and you can do this bungee jump off this gigantic needle building. And so the truth is, I just wanted to do a bungee jump, and so I figured, all right, well, how am I going to script this in here, And so, but it's cool because I like to say that Revolution Selfie is a movie of firsts, and one of the firsts is this is either the first or like very rare movie of a political documentary where there's a stunt. Especially a stunt involving like the production, involving like the director of the movie or whatever.
Yeah, very, very funny, very interesting, very cool. I enjoyed that part for sure. But
thank you.
Yeah, another thing I loved about this film is the first part of it starts with an on the ground examination of the rampant poverty in Manila. And we can see, and that kind of sets up, then you move into the jungle with the guerrillas, and you can kind of see how the depravity and absurdity and, just cruelty of poverty in Manila is tied to the MPA and the reason they are fighting. So can you kind of talk about the poverty and the people that you found in Manila, and kind of just the causes of the extreme poverty that you see in a city like Manila? Of course, here in the United States, every major city is filled with homeless people as well. This is not a judgmental thing, but there's, of course, brutal poverty in Manila as well.
Mm-hmm. On our planet right now, what we get? We got 8 billion people about, and the bottom half of them, 3 to 4 billion, are considered poor. And what is poor? Well, the poverty level is a little bit different by region, but it's basically $20 to $30 a day is the difference between poverty and middle class for most people. So basically, less than about half the world is less than $20 a day. But I want to explore not the poor. I want to explore extreme poverty, which is also a measure of in the UN. I think that extreme poverty is $2 a day. And so I wanted to look at that because this is a perfect opportunity. Like Manila is a perfect opportunity to explore extreme poverty. I mean, the moment you get off the plane, and the poverty areas in the movie are actually the areas that you see right after you get off out of the airport. And so extreme poverty is something that is really a deep thing because it's a hard world to penetrate because it's almost like being on a different planet and trying to communicate to people, and their understanding of what you're saying is different. My understanding of what they're saying is different. And so it's a hard world to get into and penetrate. And so I am able to explore extreme poverty through the eyes of a little girl, Eunice. And and her whole family, the Patrimonial family, who live at that time, they lived by the side of a highway in the middle of Manila. That was just totally by chance. Sometimes a movie that is successful like that, like Revolution Selfie, there has to be a lot of things that are not just, the filmmaker is great or whatever, but some things that happened by chance that I didn't know I was going to have such a delay in getting assigned to an NPA unit. So I was in Manila for like months. And so almost right next to where I lived, I was able to meet the Patrimonial family, and that was a really important thing, so people can understand that this girl, this little tiny girl, in the middle of Manila, and how alone she is, and how difficult life can be. And then the other thing that this raises too is the last part of your question there, where you said, and that this is tied in with the work of the NPA. And this is almost like was so important for me and such a miracle that it almost makes me feel like getting religious, because when I started out with the movie, I had no understanding of how I could tie in the Patrimonial family with the NPA. What I was trying to express was that the NPA are kind of like coming to the rescue or trying to save the Patrimonial family. Now that I say it now, and the Revolution Selfie has been seen by thousands of people, I know that people feel that that's obvious, but there's nothing in the movie where that it's said, or there's it's not really said explicitly in the movie, but somehow it all matches up, and I just find that's like a miracle or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fact that it wasn't necessarily a conscious choice on your part, but it fits so perfect is really interesting. And of course, the part with Eunice and her family is a deeply moving part. Not only your kindness, but this is an entire family with multiple children living under a bridge in extreme poverty, and this little girl is adorable and smiling and loves her family, and it's all this stuff, but yet they're still relegated to this brutal life of grinding poverty. And some of the other children that you looked at as well are like kids that are rummaging through dump sites, or basically living in or right next to huge dump sites, or polluted creeks where they are descended upon and bitten by mosquitoes hundreds of times all over their bodies. And just all those parts of the film were incredibly moving to me and really very heartbreaking. And I think that adds a sort of emotional thrust to the rest of the film. That was really well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
For sure. Another thing that you covered, which I also found moving, is, because I am moved by this sense that people all over the world, good people all over the world, are really fighting for very similar things. And you cover the protests against the new administration of Marcos. I thought that was a really wonderful thing as well. Can you talk a little bit about Marcos, who he is, and the protests against him that you visited in the film?
Yeah. So it's fascinating to me because now we have Bongbong Marcos, who is the son of the dictator Marcos. He is now the president of the Philippines. In the 1960s and 70s, a piece of the 80s, Ferdinand Marcos was the dictator of the Philippines. And then he was ousted by a people power revolution, and then he was exiled in Hawaii. Then he died a nice, peaceful death in Hawaii. Then his body was brought back and was on display somewhere in the Philippines. So what's interesting is that there was a government effort to bury Marcos in the Heroes Cemetery. So they move his body from wherever it was to the War Memorial Cemetery of the Philippines. And there were huge protests. And so I think that both sides knew the significance of this, that if you can honor the dictator and say, oh, no, he wasn't an asshole who killed thousands of people, tortured people for no reason, tortured people if they said something embarrassing to his daughter, or tortured or killed people because they're trying to finish a construction project and there's an accident and there's bodies in the construction site and they just pour concrete over the bodies and saw off their limbs and stuff. And like, that doesn't matter. We're going to bury him as a hero. That decision to bury him as a hero would pave the way for Marcos's son to reconstruct the dynasty and become the president of the Philippines years later. And so essentially that's what happened. The Duterte administration of the Philippines decided, oh, no, we're going to do this hero's burial. They actually did almost like a military operation, like this stealth burial. Like they quickly put him in the ground in the Heroes Cemetery, even though there's like thousands of people protesting out in the street. So that's what happened in Revolution Selfie. But what's happening now in 2023 is that, Bongbong Marcos now found a way to install himself as the president of the Philippines. And many people think he did this by essentially fixing the Commission on Elections, and like his computer results came out so fast that it was almost faster than you could actually count the ballots in the election. And so now we have and so it's interesting how it works. Like the creation of myth and the alteration of history can pave the way for like a totally undemocratic administration to arise.
Yeah, and a similar thing happens in something like in Brazil under Bolsonaro, when they're redeeming and romanticizing the military dictatorship and even playing around with the idea of bringing it back. This reactionary, modern, contemporary government looking back to a former military fascist dictatorship, longingly, right? This is happening around the world as well. And I just wanted to ask before we move on.
Yeah. It's like Make America Great Again.
Exactly.
And what's interesting about what you just said is that you got Bolsonaro, and then before Bolsonaro, there was Duterte, who is drug, like the so-called anti-drug dictator who killed like thousands of people in extrajudicial killings. And then so it was Duterte, then it was Trump, then it was Bolsonaro, and all three of them were clients of Cambridge Analytica, which is like, internet troll company consultant for elections and all this shit. So they basically are right-wing populist internet trolling. And what would happen is you would say something about Duterte on Facebook, and then thousands of people would find your post and they would diss you. And same thing with Bolsonaro. And, it is a global phenomenon that we're fighting against.
And just really quickly, for those that don't know, can you maybe just very briefly kind of talk about the U.S.'s relationship to the Marcos fascist dictatorship? Because this is not something just happening completely unrelated to U.S. foreign policy and military empire. It's very much something that goes hand in hand. You want to touch on that real quick?
Oh, yeah, I think so. So what happened was in World War II, the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor, and then they started to land in the Philippines. And so when that happened, the Filipino people rose up en masse in anti-Japanese armed resistance. And so the U.S. Army intelligence says that there were probably about 200,000 anti-Japanese fighters all throughout the Philippines. And based on the Philippine population at that time, and the fact that every Filipino has a family, also has a family, basically you're talking about the whole country. All Filipinos, good Filipinos, fought the Japanese. But there was a minority of people who said, oh, we can actually make some money off this shit. So let's be the puppets of the Japanese. And some of these people, they also created spy networks of Filipinos to try to, turn patriots in to be tortured and killed by the Japanese, sometimes just lynched right on the spot, And so when World War II was over, MacArthur came in, and they were a little bit shocked because the anti-Japanese resistance of the Philippines was led by the Communist Party of the Philippines. And not only that, but even a battalion of Chinese communists came over to the Philippines to fight with the Filipinos to fight the Japanese. And so he was like, if we have democracy, then these people are going to be ruling the ruling party in the Philippines. So, and they didn't want that. So they said, oh, we need some puppets of the U.S. So that we can stop the commies from taking over the Philippines democratically. And so who are these puppets? Well, let's use the same puppets that the Japanese used. So they took the Japanese puppets and they installed them as the rulers of the Philippines. And the United States has been controlling the politics of the Philippines, the so-called democratic Philippines, is from 1946 all the way through now. And so Marcos is an outgrowth of that. Marcos is a part of that ruling system, but it's just like in the Matrix, where what is the name of the dude with the glasses? Who keeps on going, Mr. Anderson or
Agent
whatever.
Smith.
Agent Smith. So Agent Smith starts to go freelance and decide, oh, I could take over the Matrix. And so Marcos was like that. He was like, oh, I'm in it for me. And so I could use the colonial structures and step into the shoes of the colonizer and try to steal from the other ruling families of the Philippines and aggrandize power to myself. And so that was Marcos's thing. It's very typical thing of third world dictators at the time. Of course, Indonesia. This is U.S. supported, fascism and a genocide against the socialists, communists of Indonesia. And so the same thing in the Philippines, where massive U.S. military aid was used to prop up the military to support the ruling class of the Philippines, which is even worse than other ruling classes around the world, because this ruling class is the worst people of the Filipino people, because they are self-selected, because they were the puppets of the Japanese.
Right.
So they are the worst, least loyal, selfish people that the Philippines could produce, and they run the country even today.
Mm. Yeah, a tale as old as time of the last century is any time, anywhere in the world since World War II, there's been a fascist dictatorship or some horrific terrorist organization or any anti-communist, anti-democratic movement soaked in blood. The U.S. is absolutely behind it, and this is no exception.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in the film, of course, you cover the poverty, your story with Eunice. You talk about the protests, what Marcos represents. I mean, you show it through visual cues, of course, what Marcos represents and the masses rising up against him as much as they can. And then you move into the jungle. You get picked up and you get to go into the encampment of one of the battalions of the New People's Army. And you talk to many people in the MPA. Can you tell us a bit about the sort of person that joins the MPA and the reasons that they gave you for joining up?
Oh my God, this is the most amazing part of it. It's really something that changed my life because and I've been, a leftist for a while. I knew about the world. I've been in different countries in the world and even been to the Philippines before, several times. So I thought I really knew what was up about imperialism and inequality. And it wasn't until that very first day when I came into the liberated zone of the New People's Army that I realized, wow, man, everything I really didn't know about the world, everything I was told about the world is a lie, because this is so powerful. The idea that that you have a revolutionary organization that in an area where there is no police brutality because we don't have police. The people themselves are organized to resolve disputes and ensure the peace, and we don't have exploitation from landlords because we drove the landlords out, and the people can farm their own land and they can farm it collectively, but only if they want to, and so there is it's so amazing. So even when you have a government that cares, even if that government has no money at all, that's better than a rich government that don't care, and so I found that so fascinating. But the people themselves, that's what is amazing to me, because you have folks who for years, and they're really, as intelligent as any college graduate or university graduate you ever met.
Oh, yeah.
People who could be doctors, lawyers, living in large houses if that's what they want. But instead, you're going to meet people who all their possessions are in one backpack, and that they are sacrificing every day, and they wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every fucking day to do whatever it is they do to help out the masses of the people. And so I thought to myself, wow, if you have 10 people like this, you could have a revolution. But I was on a mountain with 600 people who were like this, and I was like, how is that even possible? I mean, how is it that I could live my entire life and I never met people like this, who it's like a superpower or something. They can completely set aside what you consider to be like your own selfish comforts or whatever, and be part of a revolution, be totally dedicated to the masses. And so I guess I talked to a lot of people about this with the NPA, and I just came to a conclusion that there's nothing special about these folks, but it's something in every person. Every human being has this potential, that when the conditions are that bad, when there's a lot of injustice, you have something in you where you can say, no, fuck all the, selfish things of this world, your career or whatever you're thinking about, and I'm going to dedicate myself to this struggle. And not only that, but it's not as depressing as it sounds. Yeah. That's the other thing that you think, oh, wow, these people are like saints or something, and they live miserable lives or whatever. No, oh, no, it's really great. Actually, it's great to be part of a collective. It's great to live under the stars every night. I've got the best sleep of my life with the NPA, and it's not even the fear is not so bad. I mean, like we could be ambushed at any time. Or like a drone could come over and drop a bomb on us. But as long the collective, as long as we're together, we can deal with it. You have this kind of feeling in a revolution, and that is so vital. It's so powerful to understand that it's something that I've just wrote an article for Socialist Forum, which is a publication of DSA, and trying to talk about my sense of alienation in progressive politics in America, because people just don't know what's possible. It's just sort of like people think that people. There used to be a time when people thought that taking a locomotive train is bad for you because the human body was not designed to travel at 30 miles per hour. And so it's like me coming from the jet age, coming to that world where people are like, can we travel at 30 miles per hour? I gotta go to a doctor and check myself out or whatever. And so when you see what a revolution looks like, you understand, hey, it's not so bad. It's really possible. It's just your imagination is limiting what you can believe about humanity and change in America.
Mm. Yeah, incredibly well said. And yeah, one of the things that comes across when you interview these people is that they are regular people. They're incredible in amazing ways, right? They're self-sacrificial. They're deeply intelligent. They're deeply committed to something bigger than themselves. But they come from all walks of life. They're all ages. They're all gender and sexual orientations. They're just normal people, and they really believe that a better world is possible, and they actually go out and they fight for it. And one thing that I walked away from this film thinking is there's more humanity in the jungles of the Philippines than there is in the center of civilization in Manila, where people are living under bridges and sleeping in nooks and crannies of concrete. And out in the jungles, people are, coming together, living in a more authentic and humane way. And there is a sense in which you give up a little bit of that individual possibility. Maybe some of these individuals could have, as you said, lived these wonderful careers or relatively comfortable jobs in the city center, but they explicitly say, that is a meaningless life. I would rather be here fighting for a future than, working, consuming, and dying. And it was absolutely beautiful to me to see that. And one of the things also is the LGBTQ element within the MPA, the welcomingness to the LGBTQ people and the predominant, sort of role that they play in the revolution. I found that incredibly beautiful as well.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and I believe that that might be in every revolution. Like the idea of that there's a lot of LGBTQ people who join the revolution seems like a disproportionate amount. I wouldn't be surprised if that's been the case for thousands of years. Like if you look back at the French Revolution, for example, even the Philippine Revolution of 1898 was well known for the American soldiers being shocked that a large amount of the fighters who were fighting in the revolution were actually women. And so why is that? I don't know. And I think that this is something that I was just so glad to explore. There's some unique aspects of, say, like the Philippine society as well, like just the overall establishment society of the Philippines. Well, what you see on TV, you often see like a drag queen is like the host of a game show on TV in the Philippines. And there are drag queens and gay people, lesbians in every family in the Philippines. And so I would say that, the Philippines is a very sexist place. It's a very feudal, semi-feudal society. But I might say that in terms of tolerance for LGBTQ, I've actually never been in a more tolerant country in the whole world, actually, than the Philippines when it comes to this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, especially here in the U.S., which, presents itself as like this progressive, liberal pinnacle of democracy and human freedom, we're living through another iteration of extreme reaction against the LGBTQ community. And it's a mainstream hate and dehumanization of LGBTQ people. And it's obvious to me that throughout the world, that revolutionary movements would be full of marginalized and vulnerable people in various patriarchal societies because they have the most stake in overturning the status quo, and they can see that another world, another way of being could be possible, and so they throw their lot in with the revolutionary elements. I just found that to be an incredibly a beautiful aspect of the ongoing revolution in the Philippines, and I thought you covered it really well as well.
Thanks. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, with the right wing, how they're going against, drag time story hour, which is a big thing in my community here in Jackson Heights, Queens. That these right wingers come from outside their neighborhood to go yell all this evil shit against drag queen story hour at a public library. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think that the right wing is actually pretty smart, and they're picking their targets. The idea that we're gonna target like sexual freedom or choice, and you can't be who you want to be, and the right wing is really on brand with their fascism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in the guerrilla camps of the New People's Army, as you were kind of alluding to earlier, they have their own form of government, they have their own form of education, they have their own healthcare. Can you kind of talk about this, sort of how the camps are run and what non-military activities they engage in together? Because it's not all cleaning your rifle and marching by any means. It's a human, beautiful society of human beings doing a multitude of human activities, right?
Oh, man, yeah. And I think that that's one thing that people don't know about revolution, and especially folks who I think are gravitate towards Revolution Selfie because they see a lot of guns, and so they're thinking, "Wow, man, we need to get some guns or whatever," and maybe harken back to the Black Panthers, the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Armies in the different cities and their rich tradition. But that aspect of the gun can often it can obscure like the holistic aspect of what a revolution is. I think like the gun is a manifestation of what you need to continue the work that the revolution is doing, but the revolution doesn't start with a gun, and so it's the form of organization, the fact that it's structured, that it's with the masses, and that and that it's secure, and then like what the revolution really offers to people, And so after I came back from the Philippines, I read this guy named Iqbal Ahmad, I think, and he wrote that what is a revolution? A revolution is really an organization which starts to take over governmental functions. So, the idea of the revolution says we are the government, and they're going to fill the gaps in of what the government is not doing because of their lack of concern for the masses. And so the healthcare and the also something that was not in Revolution Selfie, because Revolution Selfie is it's a 2-hour movie, and there's a lot of stuff that I had to take out, is the idea about justice. And so most people on the outside think that, a revolutionary justice, that's some type of star chamber shit that is really bad, and that, they put you under a bright light and they yell stuff at you, and then they take you out and shoot you or whatever. It's not like that. Revolutionary justice, they tried to do it without arms because if you shoot people all the time, you're not going to be very politically popular in the community. And they generally can work things out in what they call like a conflict resolution. And the people who do this for the NPA, I swear could teach a class on it at Harvard for a negotiation, conflict resolution. These folks are really well trained on how to do this. And so the whole point of this is another unbelievable truth that I came away with, which is that revolution is never in the future. A revolution is not peasants would never join your revolution if you just show up and go, hey, we're the Communist Party and this is our platform and blah, 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 and just your ideas. Revolutions are not ideas. They are not words in a book. And they are not the future. They're not promises. Revolution is always now. And so a revolution is to create a new reality, new relationships of the most important relationships in your life. And so in the justice situation, the relationships between you and your neighbor, or you and your spouse. In the economic, the relationship between you and your landlord. It's a feudal relationship. We're going to redo it so that it's not a feudal relationship. And power relationship, the country to the city, and your relationship, the masses with the bourgeois classes, and so forth. And so revolution, and your relationship with yourself. And so that is the most important thing. The revolution gets you to change your relationship to yourself. And so that is one of the things that the truths I learned about revolution.
Mm. Yeah, to comprehend revolution not as the acute moment in which an old government is overthrown and replaced by a new, but as an ongoing process that's always operating, sometimes below the surface, sometimes out in the jungle, sometimes out in the streets, but the revolution is always happening. As long as the conditions are unjust, there's going to be the revolutionary process taking hold. And I do appreciate how you look at it in those terms. And what they're doing there is this well-rounded, it's not merely the fetishizing of the gun. It's like almost like this, like reluctantly the gun is the tool we have to use. We don't worship it. It's just a practical reality that we have to pick up the gun because our enemies have picked up the gun. But here's all these other ways that we're enacting the revolution. And it's about how you handle disputes in your community. It's about how people are given health care. And it's about playing volleyball with your comrades, which is another scene you shot in the film that I loved as well. Just all these people, the revolutionaries out in the jungle, and they take time to shoot hoops and play volleyball with each other. It was just awesome. And that's dual power. That's building up a way of governing society and an entire social apparatus that is dealing with the holes that a regular government leaves and building up the capacity to deal with shit that the government ostensibly is supposed to provide and deal with. And that building up of dual power is how you win people over, how you take care of their needs. That's the material reality, not just coming to them with a set of ideas or proposals and saying, are you on our side or not, right?
I think so. And I think that also I realized something about being an activist in the city as opposed to being a revolutionary in the mountain, which is that activism, especially for leftists, especially in the United States, you're always mad about something. I mean, you're always like, watching some YouTube video and go, oh, damn it, those assholes, Trump and everything. And so there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of anger about the things that are going on in this world. Mm-hmm. But it's that is easily absorbed by the hegemony. I think revolution starts when you start to realize other pathways of joy in political transformation, and that there's happiness, and so being an activist in the city can often be very stressful, very fearful. People are always trying to kill you. People are always trying to put you on some type of kill list. You could get beaten up. If the right wing wants to beat you up, you're totally defenseless, and people are always slandering you. So, often it gets so bad that an activist decides, I'm going to join the NPA, and that is just totally different experience. It's just like there is no, anger, stress, this, that. It's really about the stresses of trying to fit into your environment, into your fighting force, learning new skills and so forth, learning how you can relate to the masses, and it's a continuing feeling of improvement, kind of like self-improvement. Like, I have never heard this so many times than when I was with the NPA, when people would say, I'm trying to be less selfish. I thought that was so interesting. And people would say, I'm trying to improve myself. And why? An American would say, why? Why are you trying to be less selfish? Yeah. Most people are working on trying to be more selfish. Right. How can I serve myself more? And so the idea that they feel a value in, I've learned how to be less selfish, from being here for years in the NPA, and how that really, and basically it's like a happiness, and understanding how to plug into that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could summarize it as like the activist in the urban centers is always running the risk of burning out. It's always a matter of, are you burnt out or not? But out there, it's like it's nourishing. It's the opposite of burning out. It's uplifting. It's building upward. And that was a beautiful thing you captured as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
One of the other things, we have a couple more questions here for you. One of the other things I found really interesting was that you covered this connection between Christianity and the MPA, and a lot of people were talking about their politics and their religion in sort of like equal terms, right? And some people were even motivated by their religion, which is predominantly Christianity as far as I understand, to join the MPA, right? Taking the message of Jesus Christ and applying it means becoming a revolutionary and trying to build a better world. Whereas, of course, here in the U.S., we have the right wing taking Christianity to be synonymous with cruelty against vulnerable people and the amassing of as much wealth as you possibly can amass. And it's just so antithetical to everything. And it turns a lot of people here in the West off to religions like Christianity because of how it's so intermingled with white supremacy and capitalist logics. But I found it very interesting that there was this connection between Christians and revolutionaries. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think that what I saw going on. Well, first, I think I never met a Christian before going to the NPA. I mean, these folks are so it's like the kind of like the saints that you read about in like some type of religious text or something, and then you're meeting them for the first time or something. And I think that the experience of Christianity in the Philippines is very of today is very similar to the experience of Christianity during the colonial period from 1600s through the 1900s, so maybe it was kind of like European colonizers kind of like fucked themselves a little bit by because they thought, we're going to create like a system of mental slavery, and we're going to inculcate a system of obedience through this Christianity. But why is it that when you look at history, you find hundreds of rebellions in the colonized places that are based on Christianity? And I think that one possibility to me is that Jerusalem was a colony of the Roman Empire, and the relationship between the clerical class, the so-called Sadducees and Pharisees, who cooperated with the Romans to oppress the Jews in Jerusalem, that really dovetailed a lot with people in the colonized areas, and they say, hey, that's my story. What Jesus is going through is an anti-colonial struggle, and that's the same thing that I'm going through. And so that's a theory about it for me, that somehow like Filipinos really attach themselves to Jesus. Why is that? And the suffering that they feel, mostly coming from oppression from the local landlord or just imperialism, colonialism, they relate that to Jesus and the struggle of the Jews in the Bible. And so I think that is just fascinating, but whatever it is, as I said in the movie, I think that Jesus was more responsible for revolution than Karl Marx in the Philippines. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's the universality of Christ's message. And I'm not particularly a Christian, but I have a lot of love and appreciation for the progressive and revolutionary liberatory elements of Christianity, and for the spiritual figure of Jesus Christ himself, who I take a lot of inspiration from personally. And of course, that message can be contorted and distorted, as we see here in the West, by various reactionaries claiming to be Christians while living in a very anti-Christian life. But here it's like seeing yourself in the suffering of Christ, seeing yourself in the suffering of, the Jews in the Bible, and using that as motivation for overturning the rotten state of affairs that you currently live in. I think it's a beautiful thing. And one of the people you interviewed spoke, really beautifully about it. And I found that to be a fascinating element that I had no idea even existed. I was not sure of the religious makeup of the Philippines and any connection between religion and the Maoist guerrillas, but I thought that was a really cool thing that you highlighted there.
Mm-hmm, yeah, thank you. And when we talk about these things, sometimes I feel embarrassed because it's like I'm pretending like like I scripted it, or there was some genius on my part, but it's really it's really the people, the Pulang Bagani Battalion, and not just the rank and file of the battalion, but also battalion command and the political officers of the battalion. I really feel grateful for them. That I don't know if you know this, but other leftists in different countries diss on the Philippines because they say, oh, you guys are still doing Maoism, and that's some old-fashioned Marxism or whatever. So I think it's so fascinating that for a movement that is often associated with old-fashioned Marxism, that they were really into avant-garde film.
Yeah.
I would tell them, this is my crazy idea and all these things, and I'm going to jump off a building and everything like that. And the political officers were not only tolerant, but they were actually suggesting different crazy ideas to bring into Revolution Selfie. And so really, I love it, the fact that, if anything, when I go to screenings, it almost feels like a time machine for me, because have you ever had this experience where you take a trip someplace and you have these amazing revelations on your trip, and then you come back home, and then you I want to spread these revelations to other people, and you're talking to your mother, and she goes, oh yeah, well that's nice, dear, and is it, we're just going to go on with our life.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to tell people what you've been through on a trip. But for me, it's not a problem at all. I just roll the tape, and people are in the room, and I take them back to go meet the people of the Pulang Bagani Battalion, and it's so heartening,
Hell yeah, man. Beautiful. I love that. Yeah, and just really quickly, this is my own personal editorializing, if you will, but this idea that the Maoists are somehow backwards or of a previous era, from a communist point of view, I see Maoist movements like the MPA as being on the cutting edge of revolutionary communist movements around the world actually waging people's war against the forces of colonialism, capitalism, imperialism, and fascism. So, far from being backwards, I think they're among the most advanced. And I think we in the West have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah. One thing that I think is the strength of Maoism is, if you think about going back to Christianity, there's many different ways to be a Christian. So one Christian will just say, yeah, I go to, whatever. I go to church once in a while, and then, I want my baby to be baptized in the church, blah, blah. And so I'm a Christian. Mm-hmm. Another person will say, you know what? I have a PhD in Christianity, and I know everything about, this particular aspect of it, and I wrote my thesis about it and so forth, and I teach classes on it, and so I'm like the dog's balls of the, I'm a super scholar of Christianity. Right. And so what's interesting is they're both Christian. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same thing with Maoism. Like Maoism, yeah, you could get a PhD in Maoism, but you could also be like, a teenager in the NPA. And that ideology works right at that level, and it works at the higher level as well.
Right. Yeah, and for the revolutionary engaged in struggle, it's a living, breathing thing. Sometimes for the abstract intellectual, it can just be words on a piece of paper, abstract concepts. But for them, it's life and death. And I think there's something really important about that manifestation of it. And of course, the favorite Christians I've met are the ones that try to enact and live the message and life of Jesus, not the ones who just want to use their religious dogma as a battering ram against their social and cultural opponents, which is so often the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that maybe it's because of the power of Christianity as an anti-colonial power that this kind of like bullshit Christianity kind of like rose up and then became, I'm sorry, what do they call it? Like prosperity gospel.
Yeah, the
or
prosperity
whatever.
Gospel. Yeah, earn as much money as you can, baby. It's for Jesus.
Yeah. So religion has always had something to do with like the labor movement. It's had something to do with like Latin American Revolution, Philippine Revolution, and so I think it's interesting that the people figured out, no, let's do a different kind of Christianity called Christianity, but we're going to try to do the opposite and be like have it put forth reactionary views,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the dialectic within religions themselves, and I always say every major religion has a political spectrum in it, right? From the far left revolutionary liberationists to the far right fascist, want to impose through violence their very specific dogma. And so our job as leftists, as communists, as socialists, is not to disregard religion, but to treat it as a terrain of struggle and to fight for the revolutionary and liberatory interpretations of the various religions, which are really there. They're not just something we impose on the tradition. Those traditions are really in those religious cultural traditions, and we can pull them out and we can emphasize them. And I think that's our job. And I see people in the MPA doing exactly that. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right, so one more question before we ask where we can find your work online, and that's just kind of a nice way to wrap up this conversation, is what did you learn in your time there that most surprised you about the MPA, about the Philippines, about anything, and what do you wish people around the world knew about the New People Army?
I think I began thinking that I was going to make a movie that was going to be interesting about something that's going on in the Philippines. And the more I dove into it, the more I realized that I'm really tapping into an energy that's on the planet Earth, and that the Philippines revolution, it's like just there's many different faces, and it happens in the Philippines revolution. India is called Naxalite revolution, and Kurdistan called Rojava revolution, Kurdish freedom movement, and especially this aspect, and what I'm talking about is peasants, like the peasant for most of human history, most humans have been peasants, so the power of being able of organizing, the power of when they decide we're gonna organize, we're gonna overthrow a dictator, is really something. It's like touching on a live wire of the electricity of humanity to me. And so what I did is I thought, oh well, I could call this movie Revolution Selfie, but then I decided, you know what, I'm going to call it Revolution Selfie: The Red Battalion. I'm going to give it two names because I wanted to do other Revolution Selfies, you know. So this movie is called The Red Battalion. This movie that I'm working on now is called Revolution Selfie: War with No Name. And so what I'm trying to do is find a commonality, that human live wire that hides inside different peoples and cultures. So I embedded myself with the Yazidi people, part of the Kurdish freedom movement in the autonomous administration of Sinjar in Sinjar mountain range, northern Iraq. And so the Yazidi people survived the ISIS genocide 2014, and they organized revolutionary militias to defend themselves against ISIS. ISIS is still there, you know, and they are facing challenges from the Iraqi army as well as from the Turkish army, which is really fitting because the Turkish military is basically the Islamic State. ISIS stands for Islamic State. They lost their state. Turkey is an Islamic state, and they are also terrorizing the Yazidi people. And so to see those folks under stress like that, and to draw commonalities with the Philippine Revolution, I think this is sort of like my life's goal right now. And what I'm trying to do is elucidate a truth about humanity and what revolution is. And so that's the biggest thing that I learned. It set me on this like path in life.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I agree. It's when you watch a film like this one, you realize that what they're doing is profoundly human, and it transcends all ethical, linguistic, cultural divides. And you can just see that these are regular people fighting for human decency against, you know, the ruling elites, against those with all the wealth and power. And that's a story as old as humanity itself. And you know, you can really see the human struggle within these individual particular struggles, and you bring that out in your film, but it's right there at the surface for anybody to engage with and be inspired by. And I personally find it incredibly inspiring. And for your future films, you have an open invite to come back on and discuss them. I really love what you're doing with your filmmaking, and you're
awesome.
You're a wonderful podcast guest as well.
Well, great.
Yeah. Before I let you go,
so Revolution Selfie: The Red Battalion. People want to see that. They should go to Means TV, Means TV streaming channel on Roku and other, I guess, devices and stuff. And you know, I really hope that people do it to learn about Revolution Selfie. And then for me, one thing that is important to me is I never thought I would say this as a filmmaker, but I actually don't care too much about getting on Netflix or whatever, because I love like public performance of the movie. Because to see the movie live with a group of people, the experience to me is so energizing and it's so educational for people that even though I'm bringing it down to hundreds when a movie could be accessible to tens of thousands, it's actually really important for public performance. So if anybody wants to do a public performance, just let me know, because actually I have a duty to the Pulan Bagani Battalion, a lifelong duty to show Revolution Selfie whenever. I mean, as you know from in the movie, some people have passed away, some people have given their lives, and so this movie, in a sense, they live on. I'd love to show Revolution Selfie wherever, whenever. Revolution Selfie is in 7 different languages. It's been shown in Chiapas. It's been shown like all over Europe, and it's in Arabic. It's in Kurdish, you know. And so And so I just so if anybody out there wants to screen Revolution Selfie, find a way to contact me, Revolution Selfie on Facebook, and then let's do it.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful idea. I know personally people that work at little art, film places locally, and you could get this screened at a local, sort of like indie film or art film studio. Maybe not the big, in industry monopoly theaters, but certainly in these smaller ones. And yeah, getting around communally and watching a film of like this. I mean, it's very human. It's the modern version of getting around a fire and telling a story. And there's something deeply human and communal in that alone. But for people that do want to contact you and might want to follow up on that recommendation, I'll link to Means TV and the show itself. Where can people find you directly?
Well, I think that the best way is on Facebook. It's amazing that people are not even going on Facebook anymore. But for me, go on Facebook. Go on Facebook and look up Revolution Selfie and connect up to me there. Or on Facebook. Oh, wow. I guess I must be an old fart. On Facebook, find Steven De Castro. And if you want to send me an email, it's tenatlawyer@gmail.com, tenatlawyer@gmail.com.
Perfect. I'll link to all that in the show notes. Wonderful film. Thank you so much for coming on. Keep up the great work, my friend.
And thank you.
Say tongue, the young gun, lock, load, and bust one. Champion with it like pum. Lebanon gorillas hit a Avon from 10 yards with little pebbles. I call it strength and all. But when it's broadcast on Robin, they savages like Tarzan. They never give the background story. They rather damn your freak pussy with trickery. It headline news. It's nothing new. And if it's only half the truth, it ain't true. Living proof that gorillas in the Philippines jungle won't stop, won't quit till the babies don't struggle. I rumble with colonization's effects on my people. Homes, the buck stops here. With a buck to your ears, the current affairs. That wear my fellow organizers out. Same machine that be wiping my fellow activists out. From the comfort of a couch, we make critiques of the world. While little girls in the mountains let the sunshots hurl.
Is you ready?
All day, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Megaphones up, bandana across the face, dog. Always, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Rifle to the sky, bandana across the face, dog. All day, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Megaphones up, bandana across the face, dog. Always, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Rifle to the sky, bandana
I
across
learned
the
the
face.
speeches and teachings of Malcolm X. Nooses around her neck made Malcolm drop the little and capitalize the X. He and the men square drum make the big go dumb. Compel sisters in the mountains back home to grab guns. My lungs pump, Los Angeles small, strong. I handle my M1 like guerrilla villagers in the Viet Cong. Ho Chi Minh trailing your home girl's favorite. I'm the maker of the music for the busboy and the waitress. Every blue collar hero piece the blue scholar G.O.A.O. Saba. Did you hear about the talks in the White House? Iran is now a new threat. I told you were up next. American rampage till the rain of Middle East left. Up jump the boogie, put a bullet inside, and let the gorillas and government collide in a fight to make the poverty disseminate. Bullets fire hella straight. Showdown in Chinatown and downtown L.A.
Is you ready?
All day, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Megaphones up, bandana across the face, dog. Always, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Rifle to the sky, bandana across the face, dog. All day, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Megaphones up, bandana across the face, dog. Always, dog. Whatever you say, dog. Rifle to the sky, bandana across
I
the
recurve
face.
the words of Joma over and over for every soldier with a good run slung over his left and right shoulder. Got people and triple K slang. Make change whether school books or the bang bang, gang bang. Gather up the troops all on the block. Put bullet holes in the White House and connect the dots. We don't need those cops, we need the hood on lock. We need the murders of our people by our people to stop. We need our money to recycle, keep the neighborhood rich. We need to monitor the education of our kids. We need the money to be evenly distributed out. We need Ann Coultier to shut a motherfucking mouth. Zapatista guerrilla as soon as the beat play. My rifle's a little scrappy, it's my indigenous spear chucking on mine. My spear X these white boys out like Kevin Federline.
Hello, kids. Just one at a time.
Oh, yeah? What kind of ice cream is that?
This is the Mao Zedong,
No, the next one over.
Mao Zedong bar.